extrasensory validation of the paranormal. But we'll actually be talking about EVPs, as in electronic voice phenomena. And Dennis Claveau, who is the founder and lead investigator of the Ontario E.V.P. Society, will be playing what he believes are spirit voices caught on tape for us in just a few moments. This is a fascinating phenomenon, and whether you believe what is being captured on audio tape are actual spirit voices or something else, a voice from another dimension, ETs, I don't know what's going on, but I've heard thousands of EVPs over the years. Some of them are garbled and not so hot and very difficult to understand. Some of them are clear as day, and you're going to hear some of them tonight. And to tell us about what he does at the Ontario E.V.P. Society is the founder and lead investigator there, Dennis Claveau. Welcome to The Conspiracy Show. How are you?
Hello, Richard. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. The Ontario E.V.P. Society, Extrasensory Validation of the Paranormal. Tell me about your group. Where are you, first of all?
Certainly. Well, we are based out of Kitchener, Ontario. So, as the name states, we are in the region here. We are a non-profit group. We travel all over Ontario investigating claims of paranormal activity. So we don't charge for our investigations, home or business.
And how many EVPs? First of all, before we get into that, give me your definition of an EVP, electronic voice phenomena. What is it exactly?
Certainly, and there are many different explanations about it, but the one that we go by is it would be a sound or a voice that was heard only on playback. It wasn't audible at the time it was captured, so you couldn't hear it with the human ear when you were actually there, but on playback it shows up on the audio recording.
And where are you gathering or capturing these EVPs? What kinds of locations?
And it's actually really interesting because you'd think it would only be in like really spooky haunted places, but we've actually captured them in churches. We've captured them in brand new homes, and of course the odd spooky place out in the middle of nowhere. But it doesn't really matter what place we go to. It seems that wherever paranormal activity is, so are EVPs.
So when you arrive at a location that is alleged to be haunted or there's some sort of paranormal activity, you take your audio cassette recorder in there, digital recorder, whatever, and what do you do, like a bait and trap? Do you push record, leave it in the room and leave, or do you walk around the grounds in the building asking questions and hoping for a reply?
Well, it's all of the above. We do have several recorders going at any given time. We will leave a few stationary around the home. We will sit down and have active EVP sessions where we ask questions and try and trigger a response. And we will have one in our hand walking around with us, so if we just capture anything ambient. The goal is to capture anything that could go off at any time because, I'm sure as you would know, these things don't operate like clockwork. So the more ears, the better.
And how common or rare is it to capture an EVP? Give me a ratio, for example. How much tape do you have to actually record before you get an EVP?
And that's an excellent question. And I can use one location, the Blue Ghost Tunnel in Niagara Falls, as an example. We've been there about 6 or 7 times over the past 2 years, and we've amassed literally days' worth of audio. And we only have about 20 or so EVPs, which amounts to just about 2 minutes out of almost a week's worth of audio to go through. So it's a very, very small amount that you actually get in terms of ratio. And
when you listen to them in playback, are you able to hear what they're saying at that point, or do you need to run it through some sort of an audio enhancing program to clean it up, eliminate the background noise, or do they present themselves pretty much the way as they're recorded?
And that actually does vary as well, because we have had some EVPs that come clear as day. It sounds as if the person was in the room speaking right into the audio recorder. And we've had others that require a little bit of cleaning up to actually hear what it says. Now, that might have to do with like how far away it's being broadcast, or if it's actually interacting with the machine itself. That's something we've yet to figure out, but it is an interesting angle on the EVPs themselves.
Now, why are they so often so garbled and muffled and difficult to hear? You would think that if a spirit, if that's in fact what we're dealing with, wanted to make itself known, I don't know, they would take elocution classes or something. They're just so difficult to hear so often.
It's very true, and I think part of it is because it's not sound as we know it. Part of it is if the sound was audible at the time, then our human ears would hear it. So it would have to be something different. Part of my theory that goes into EVPs is that electronic voice phenomenon is just actually that. It's a form of electricity. It goes through electromagnetic frequency that's interacting directly with the audio recorder. So that would pick up on the microphone what we can't hear, but it comes through when it does come through, it comes through jumbled and garbled and sometimes robotic sounding.
Now, I spoke with an EVP researcher who lives not too far from up Barrie Way here in north of Toronto, and he has an interesting theory that the reason they sound these voices, that is, sound so garbled, is they're operating in a different medium. They're actually existing in a different medium. I'm not sure if it's related to ectoplasm, but it's, if voice travels differently underwater than it does in an oxygen, hydrogen type atmosphere, oxygen, nitrogen, hydrogen atmosphere. So he's theorizing that wherever these voices are coming from, wherever they are, there's some sort of a different medium in which they exist. And so that's why, the voice is having to travel through that medium. Does that make sense to you?
Well, I definitely agree. It does. It explains a lot of the discrepancies with most of the explanations behind EVPs. Because if you look at it through history, tape recorders and digital recorders only have a few pieces that are very similar. That being mechanisms in the microphone themselves. So whatever is acting as an electronic voice phenomenon, it would have had to have existed before all of this wonderful technology that we have today. So it could very well be a different form, a different medium that we can't hear, but it is interacting with the microphone, and that's what's being recorded.
Dennis Claveau is with us. He is the founder and lead investigator of the Ontario E.V.P. Society, Extrasensory Validation of the Paranormal. And when we come back, we'll play some spirit voices, allegedly. Voices from beyond the grave. Here on The Conspiracy Show, my name is Richard Serrett.
Peering into the shadows, where the truth often hides. You're listening to The Conspiracy Show with Richard Serrett.
All right, Dennis Claveau is with us, the lead investigator and founder of a rather interesting group, the Ontario Society of E.V.P. Now, we are going to play a clip here. We don't have them, Dennis, I apologize, we don't have them in any particular order. I'm guessing you've heard these many times, so you'll be able to sort of tell us what it is we're listening to. And we should also point out that if people want to listen to these, can they go to your website as well, Dennis? Can they hear them on the website? That's evpsociety.ca, www.evpsociety.ca. And so, Tim, why don't you fire the first one off here? All right. Dennis, does that one sound familiar? Again, that's kind of garbled, but we definitely heard a voice coming through there. And I'll tell you what I heard. I heard someone saying something, she died?
Yes, there was actually two voices, one older man and one younger man, and they both said she died. Interesting point was that actually happened after one of our team members had called out the name Allie, which is one of our investigators. So they didn't like her very much, and I think that was their response.
So Now, one of the things that I've sort of learned over the years talking to paranormal researchers and ghost hunters such as yourself is sort of two theories as to what these voices are. In some cases, what you're actually listening to is simply the residual sort of an echo, this residual energy left over after someone passes away that's maybe absorbed into a building and so forth. And so that voice really has no consciousness. It's just on sort of a loop. It plays over and over. In some cases, though, these entities seem to have a consciousness. You can interact with them. For example, you put out a question, they deliver a response. What most often do you think you're recording? This spiritual residue, these endless loops, or spirits with a consciousness to them?
I think the ones that we can hear audibly are more so the playback recordings, like the residuals.
Right.
The ones that seem to interact with us, those come up more often on E.V.P., which is especially for the Blue Ghost Tunnel location, because there wasn't anybody that died in that area. So there was no murder, there was no passing away. So to have voices like that show up, it does strike an interesting parallel for that as well, because it's more so the expectation of something there. So everyone's mental energy is actually manifesting something that's intelligent.
And again, when you asked the question about what about Allie, you heard nothing until you played the tape back later.
That's correct. And we did not have the two individuals' voices in our team at all. Those two people, we had no idea who they were.
How do you rule out someone playing a joke on you, or, I don't know, radio interference? There must be certain protocols that you adhere to, scientific protocols.
Well, absolutely. We do check out the locations at depth when it is in the daytime. We go through, make sure there's nothing wired up, and make sure we're familiar with the area. And some locations are so remote that the chances of it being somebody out there playing a joke, it is pretty slim. But we make sure that we have all of the entrances monitored at all times to make sure that there's nobody that can sneak in. And we do follow up. We're fairly thorough with our investigations, so there's not really an inch of anything that doesn't get explored when we're on location.
Dennis Claveau is with us, the founder and lead investigator of the Ontario E.V.P. Society, Extrasensory Validation of the Paranormal. And again, their website is evpsociety.ca. Tim, let's fire up another one and play another EVP. All right, now, I definitely heard a male voice there, but I couldn't make out what it was saying, or he was saying. Help us out, Dennis.
Certainly, and that one actually gave me goosebumps listening to it again. It always does. That was captured between myself and my senior investigator, Jim, speaking. We kept hearing thumps, and this was again in the Blue Ghost Tunnel. And there was a period of silence between us talking. I was there, so I knew it was quiet. But on playback, you hear the man's voice, and it sounds like he's very quickly saying, "You may as well start running now."
Oh dear. Now I don't know, Tim. Are you able to fire that one again, or is that one gone? I don't understand the. Hard to say. I mean, it sounded like something like what you said. You better start running now, although it's very short. There's also kind of a tinny quality there. It's almost as if, in order for these spirit voices to become audible, they have to manipulate, I don't know, an electromagnetic energy, or we often hear that if you're running a fan in the room, or there's something that they can use and manipulate that sound. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, it does. It does seem to be that they're manipulating some type of electric field, because some of the EVPs that do come through, they either sound very electronic or very robotic. And so I think that's what lends to that theory.
And how much is that attributed to you simply having to not manipulate the audio, but clean it up, eliminate the background noise, maybe boost the levels? Is some of it as a result of that?
I would say what we go through, if we have to do all sorts of things and play it backwards, we don't count it as an EVP. If we can play it through on its normal capacity and we hear something strange, it either sticks right out to us or it takes a very, very small amount of changing, like just clearing out the background noise to bring that out further. Anything else we don't count because that could be the program rendering it. We don't want to mistake that as evidence.
Dennis, what do you think is going on here? I mean, are you certain that these are spirit voices? Could they be voices from another dimension? Could they be ETs? Could they be sort of demonic tricksters? What do you think is going on here?
I think that it's an entity that we don't yet understand. We're on the cusp of figuring out what is going on here. I think it's going to take some more digging to find out exactly what's going on. It's the same thing where people are trying to, find different forms of a higher being. This could be the very same thing. One person's ghost is another person's demon, kind of thing.
So you don't necessarily believe that they are, in all cases, disembodied voices of the dead?
Well, in this particular instance, and this is why I use the Blue Ghost Tunnel as an example, there are no reports of anyone dying in the tunnel itself. It's just a train tunnel. There have been deaths surrounding the area, but nothing in the vicinity of the tunnel itself. So for it to be a disembodied voice of someone who's passed away, I don't think that they would travel 50 or 100 yards to an abandoned tunnel away from where they died. I think what's happening in this particular location is actually a manifestation of everybody's fear or excitement or anger, regret, whatever it is. It's the mental energy getting a life of its own, basically. So that would be something separate from somebody dying, but it would still be an entity in itself.
All right, we'll play another clip here in a second. I'm not sure if we have time before the break. Probably. Well, before we do that, Tim, I want to ask, or I'm going to throw the phone lines open here, and if anyone has any form, if you've ever had any form of spirit communication, I'd love to hear from you. We'll make the phone lines available. And if you've perhaps even recorded an EVP, although we won't expect you to play it on the air tonight, that might be difficult. Maybe just tell us the circumstances under which you were able to record this ghostly voice and what the voice said and how you reacted when you heard it the first time. And we'll also make the phone lines available as we batten down the hatches and prepare for the onslaught of Hurricane Sandy and this Frankenstorm. If you're anywhere in the affected area, up and down the eastern seaboard, if you've got any news to report, if you're starting to see some heavy winds or rain or, God forfend, a flooding, let us know what's going on where you live, and we'll get to that during the rest of the hour here, and we'll keep Dennis Claveau with us as well as we continue to delve into EVPs. Dennis is the founder and lead investigator of the Ontario E.V.P. Society, Extrasensory Validation of the Paranormal. Let's play another one, Tim. All right, that sounded like either a female or a young child. I'm not sure which. Dennis, okay. What's going on there?
Now, that one was actually very interesting, and if you have the chance to hear it through headphones, it's actually very clear. What happened was we had brought a guest investigator to the Blue Ghost Tunnel. I'll try and make this quick so you can fit in a break. But she was reacting very strongly to whatever was in there. She started having panic attacks and got very excited. So we actually had to physically drag her out of the tunnel because she was in hysterics. And shortly after everyone had left the tunnel, because we had gotten out of there so fast, we'd left the recorder in the tunnel itself, and it sounded like somebody laughing at the fact that we had left. And shortly after that laughter, there's a very, very nasty voice that says, "You took her," almost in direct reference to our guest investigator as well. So that one sticks out for us.
So you believe that she was saying, I say she, it sounded like a female voice to me. You believe this voice was saying, "You took her."
Now, in this particular EVP, it sounded like it was laughing. It was almost like an insane type of laughter. It wasn't just like, ha-ha. It was more like something a crazy person would laugh.
Maniacal, yes.
Maniacal laughing, yes.
Do we have time to play that one more time, Tim? No, he's giving me the nod. So we'll when we come back on the other side, we can play it again. So we'll open up the phone lines. Anyone out there who's had any form of spirit communication, maybe it was through a Ouija board, maybe you actually heard a spirit voice. Perhaps it came through a medium. You went to see a medium. Or perhaps you've captured an EVP of your very own. Would love to hear from you. Thunder Bay to the Carolinas, Maine to Minnesota. We're talking EVPs here on The Conspiracy Show.
Poking holes in the darkness. The Conspiracy Show with Richard Serrett.
And welcome back. Talking about EVPs, electronic voice phenomena. These are voices, or in some cases animal sounds, could be a pounding, that are caught on an audio recording device. Now, whatever you may think, whether you believe in ghosts or not, there's something definitely going on here. Dennis Claveau has joined us, the founder and lead investigator from the Ontario E.V.P. Society. And I don't know Dennis, but I don't believe he's perpetrating a hoax, nor do I believe the countless other ghost hunters, paranormal researchers, and individuals who capture these EVPs are perpetrating a hoax. The question is, what are they recording? What are they capturing? Is it the voice or the sound of a disembodied spirit? Is it radio interference? Probably not. Is it some unknown entity, an ET? I'm dubious about that one. Could it be a demonic entity? Possibly. Could it be some sort of residual energy left over from whoever occupied a building or a house or a location? Perhaps. But we're hearing these EVPs now for ourselves, and make of them what you will. Dennis, are you good to take some calls here?
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, let's weigh in with Jeff from Michigan. Hello, Jeff. Welcome to The Conspiracy Show. Jeff, are you there? You got to lock in Jeff for me, Tim, if you could.
Okay, I had gotten off work one night, and I was living alone. My parents had been passed away for a number of years, and I was really curious about trying to get one of these Ouija boards to work. Well, there was a storm front coming in that evening, and I put this thing out, and I was taking a shot glass, moving it around, and I just couldn't get anything to work. Well, a lightning bolt hit and knocked the power out. So I was fumbling around looking for a candle or something to light it with, and the telephone rang. Now, I had one of these old rotary phones, big, black, heavy rotary phone plugged in a wall, and I picked it up, and the lights were still out, and it was just full of static. But through the static, I could hear a really strange, really broken up voice calling my name, and I mean, it was like, one of those movies where you hear like air escaping from a corpse or something, and it was coming out, and really spooky, but that's all it was. So I thought it was a crank joke, so I'm on the line, and I'm hearing the static. I'm saying, okay, who is this? Who is it? And nothing. So I hung up, and the power came back on, and that was just very strange, So I don't really think it was anyone playing a prank on me, but I mean, I can't be sure, but I don't think so.
Great call. Thank you for that, Jeff. Jeff, how are things in Michigan? What's the weather like there?
We're getting into a cold spell, and they're forecasting winds. Sustained winds of maybe up to 20, 22 miles an hour, waves up to 20 to 25 feet coming up within the next 2 days, and wind gusts of 40 up to 58 miles an hour.
And whereabouts are you? Are you on the lake?
Yeah, I'm at South Haven.
South Haven. Is that south of Chicago?
It's north of Chicago. It's
north of Chicago.
Benton Harbor, south of Holland, Michigan. We're south of Muskegon and Grand Rapids.
Oh, okay.
So it's still a little calm. Yeah, it's just windy, cold, breezy, but it's supposed to change very rapidly tomorrow and Tuesday.
All right, Jeff, thanks for the call. Stay safe.
You too now. Good night.
All right. Dennis, what do you make of, I've heard reports over the years of people receiving these strange phone calls from the dead, some believe. Have you ever investigated anything like that?
It is a very strange phenomenon. It's certainly not out of the realm of what we're discussing here. It certainly is an interesting phenomenon in itself. Now, the fact that entities and these beings could manipulate electronics or, in this case, a telephone, and sparking that, of course, would be the lightning bolt, I would assume. It does add a very interesting perspective on that.
I had I'm not sure if I should tell this story. Tim, you can vouch for me. This is a very strange coincidence that we would be talking about EVPs and then Jeff's call about the strange phone call. I have my cell phone in my pocket, and my Samsung Android. Just got it, not very familiar with it, and I had the ringer turned down because I was in studio earlier doing some work. And all of a sudden, I hear a voice coming from my pocket, and I recognize the voice. It's my bookkeeper. We've been talking back and forth the last couple of days because it's my tax time coming up, and it happens. I'm not going to mention any names here, but it just so happens his wife is very ill, in hospital, and I believe she has, pneumonia right now. It's not a good situation, and my thoughts and prayers are with him and his family. But he starts calling out from my pocket. I hear him. He's calling out her name. He says, "Mary, is that you? Mary, is that you?" And I reach into my pocket and I realize it's my bookkeeper on the line, and I call out his name. He can't hear me. And I don't know what happened, whether I accidentally, pocket dialed him, or whether he accidentally dialed me, and when he didn't hear a voice on the other end. I don't know. Very strange situation, but I just thought that was odd that that would happen, and we're talking about voices from beyond the grave tonight. Dennis Claveau stays with us. We'll continue to hear some more EVPs. Stay with us, The Conspiracy Show.
You're listening to The Conspiracy Show with Richard Serrett.
And we're talking about capturing ghosts' voices on audio tape, or what are believed to be the ghosts or the voices of the dearly departed. Dennis Claveau is with us. He is the founder and lead investigator of the Ontario E.V.P. Society, Extrasensory Validation of the Paranormal. They operate out of Kitchener, and their website is www.evpsociety.ca. Now, Dennis, can anyone do this? Could I just go home tonight, take my old Marantz digital recorder, press record, leave it in a room, leave it in the basement, and wake up in the morning and play it back and see what happens? Is it that simple?
It is that simple. Anybody with a recorder, even the old tape cassette recorders, they can leave it in a room. If they think that there's spirit activity, if they think there's an entity there, they can go ahead, ask any questions, or just leave it overnight, and they'll have to listen to the audio all the way through, of course, but if there's something there, then it may show up.
Now, if you're looking at the recorder, let's say you're keeping an eye on the VU meter, even though you don't hear the voice, do you see the VU meter move?
And that is interesting. It's something that we're looking at putting together. Currently, my technical specialist, Michael, is looking at making a device that will not only capture the EVP, but it will also capture a number of different readings from ambient radiation to any fluctuations in the EMF field, anything like that, so we can figure out exactly what's going on at the time of when an EVP is captured.
All right. Tim, can we fire up another one? Let's hear another EVP. No question about what the voice there is saying. Find me. Now, I've heard a lot of EVPs in my life. That's about the clearest EVP I've come across. That's a grade A EVP, Dennis. Tell me about the circumstances.
Absolutely, and that's one of the highlights of our EVPs. This was in a brand new house. This house was about 3 years old in Woodstock, Ontario, in a new subdivision. We were doing a preliminary walkthrough, so it wasn't even part of the actual investigation. So we had left the audio recorder on the main floor. The homeowners were in the basement, just walking us through and talking about different things that are going on in their home. I myself was on the staircase between the two floors. My investigator, Graham, and my senior investigator, Jim, were both on the staircase with me. There was nobody on the main floor. We would have seen somebody walk in the room. We would have heard something. It was on the main coffee table, and it was captured when everybody else was in the basement. So that one blew us away. This
recording sounds as if this entity, this ghost, saddled right up to the microphone, took the microphone, put it right up to his or her mouth, and spoke directly into the mic. I mean, this is not from across the room. This is not muffled. This is, you couldn't ask for a more clear. Is that an indication of the strength of the entity in terms of the haunting? What does it tell you?
Now, that was very interesting as well, because in that location, one of our investigators was actually scratched. So it could directly correlate to the strength of that entity. Alternatively, it could just mean that it's on a better signal than the other spirit voices are. If you think of it like a radio station, if you're not fully tuned in to AM 740, you may not be hearing us very clearly, but you'll still hear us. But if you're tuned into the right radio station, then you'll hear us clear as day. So I think that might be at play too.
You mentioned one of your investigators was scratched. Tell me about that.
Yes, our investigator, Graham, during the investigation, we were sitting in the basement. It was three of us. It was myself, Graham, and the homeowner. Graham was sitting by himself on a soft leather couch. I was sitting about 3 feet away from him on the ground, and the homeowner was sitting across from myself about 10 feet away. So we were in the pitch black. We were just sitting there asking questions. It was very quiet. So I'd asked, and I started challenging. I said, you know what, we don't believe you. There's nothing here. If you're actually here, then you better do something. And ask and you shall receive. Graham said that he felt a burning scratch on his back, like a cat just went down his back. So I asked him to come over, and I looked through the camera's night vision. I lifted up his shirt, and I nearly freaked out myself because, sure enough, there were fresh scratches in two directions down his back. And this wasn't something he could have done himself, because there were scratches beginning at the top of his left shoulder, going all the way back down his back diagonally to his waistline. And then there was another one that was a very broad scratch that started at the top of his neck all the way down his spine. So that one shook him pretty badly. He took a little bit of time before he came back to the team, but thankfully he's still with us.
Which begs the question. Your nonprofit. Is this something that it seems to become almost this a popular hobby now with people? But people maybe are not appreciating what they're messing with here. If you're talking about a demonic entity, for example, you could be opening up a door into a whole world of pain and misery for yourself. What precautions do you take, Dennis? How do you know you're not bringing some of these things home with you?
And that's something that we look at on every investigation. It's with any type of science. If you're going out into the unknown, you have no idea what you're walking into. So we take precautions in terms of rituals like grounding and shielding, things like that. We borrow from Native American rituals to other things that we read up on. We do have some very good friends in the psychic community that are able to teach us methods to kind of prevent these things from coming home with us. But with it not being an exact science, there's no way to definitively say if we're actually stopping this from happening or not.
And have you actually brought something home?
Personally, I don't think so. I haven't had anything come home with me, thankfully. I haven't had any piggybackers, but some of our investigators have almost been taken over, almost been possessed. They've certainly been influenced heavily. I wouldn't use the word possession because that's a pretty tough one, but some of our investigators have been overcome by strong personalities.
Can you give me an example? Can you give me an example of that?
Certainly. It was in Drummond Hill Cemetery, actually. One of our investigators, Allie, she had been overcome by a strong personality. She began acting erratically. She went away from the group, and you could see on her face it wasn't herself. And she would almost act violently towards some of the members when we tried to walk towards her, to a point where one of our investigators, Michael, who's known Allie for a long, long time, she claimed that she didn't know who he was, and she was going to call the police if he didn't leave her alone. To which he replied, "It'd be a pretty strange way to explain, considering we're wearing the same shirt." But she did not act herself whatsoever, and it took us almost a couple hours to get her out of that state.
All right, Tim, do we have another one ready to fire? So there we hear one of the investigators talking, and then over top of that, we hear that disembodied voice. What do you gather, Dennis, that voice is saying?
And now that one was interesting as well. Again, back to the Blue Ghost Tunnel. That one sounded like a woman saying, "I know that. Who are you?" It seemed almost in regards to what Ali was talking about, the graffiti and different symbols on the walls.
Again, what was the voice saying?
It sounded like she was saying, "I know that. Who are you?"
I know that. Who are you? It's like they desperately want to be heard, known. There's kind of a sadness in some of these, isn't there? I mean, obviously these are, if they are passed on, if they're still earthbound, I guess, that would tend to suggest that they may have passed on in tragic circumstances, or there was something unresolved. But do you get is there a sense of foreboding or sadness or tragedy in these places where you capture these voices?
In some of these places, it's hard not to have a predisposition when you're walking into it, because you hear all the stories, you hear all the rumors. But when you're listening to the EVPs, I mean, it's very hard not to become emotional with some of them, because some of them do sound so desperate, so sad. And it seems almost like they're an actual personality that's trapped there. But it's too early to tell exactly what that is, so you have to keep that emotion in check when you're listening to it.
Aside from going to these places, recording these EVPs, maybe in some cases confirming that there is some activity there, what else can you do for either the homeowner or these disembodied voices?
Well, what we normally do, we offer the service of using the cleansing ritual, going through with sage or sweetgrass. We can't 100% say this is going to do anything. I mean, in the past we have alleviated some problems, calmed down some activity. Other examples would range from offerings to an entity using traditional tobacco or honey or whiskey, anything like that. Anything that we can find either in Native American ritual or early European ritual, we try to put that to practice, because that seems to be the most effective method. But in terms of moving on spirits, we do have some psychics and mediums that work with us on a part-time basis that claim that they're able to move those spirits on to the next life or the next world. But again, scientifically, it's hard to put that into context.
Tim, do you have time for one more? Can we squeeze in another one? Let's hear another EVP. Not sure if that's a voice, Dennis, or we're hearing someone stomping their feet. What are we hearing here?
Now, that one actually was, again, one of the more emotional ones. This was captured in Unity Church right here in Kitchener, Ontario. We had done what we call dead time. So we had let 3 members in different parts of the church, completely alone, completely in the dark for an hour. As we were wrapping that up, a group of us were in the prayer room. You hear us leaving. You hear us walking down the stairs. So there was nobody in the prayer room. There was nobody on the upper floor. The recorder in that room actually caught what sounded like a child's voice saying, "Leave here," or "Leave us," something to that effect. And then it says, "He'll kill you." So it's one of those things. When I first listened to it, it almost brought tears to my eyes, because thinking in any capacity children are trapped or left behind, that's always a sad thing. But
it is. That's always difficult to hear. I'm always as well moved by the EVPs of children's voices. Dennis, thank you for joining me tonight. And again, it's the Ontario E.V.P. Society, Extrasensory Validation of the Paranormal, the website evpsociety.ca. I appreciate your time.
Well, thank you very much for having me on.
All right, Dennis Claveau. Thank you for joining us. Stay safe, stay warm, stay dry. Thank you to Tim Spreen for audio production and producing, and I'll be back next week with a brand new show. Hope you'll be along for the ride. R. Gary Patterson, rock and roll investigator, will be with us to talk about the Paul is dead rumor, which got started about 46 years ago next month. In the meantime, don't be afraid. There's nothing concealed that won't be revealed, and nothing hidden that won't be made known. What you hear in the dark, speak in the light. What I say in a whisper, proclaim from the housetops. Move over, Aphrodite. I'm coming home. Night.